All right, hi, I'm Joanne Volkman, and I work in the IT department, and I'm a project manager. And what that means is, well, it depends on what day it is. You know, you just never quite know. See if I can make this thing work. If not, I'll just get along. All right, so I'm here to talk about project management. I'm not quite sure because we have a building full of engineers, but here we go. Basically, on the left, or your right, it says project management is project management. And once you have these skills down, you really can apply them to any job. I have a niece who's an event planner for Marriott hotels. I have friends who are construction project managers. I happen to manage software development. It's all the same skills. It's just organizing. Empathy is super important. That's one that gets left out a lot in all official materials. But I can tell you that if you want to be the project manager that people like, instead of the project manager people resent, you really need to see what people's lives are like and what does it feel like with their experience with your software, their department, their lives. And so that matters a lot. You have to be really good at negotiating, marketing, communication, motivation, and ultimately accountability. Because when it's all said and done, if the app doesn't work, the project fails, whatever, they don't go after the engineer. They go after the project manager, who could often say, this is beyond my control. But control is what project managers are paid to do. So we can't abdicate that responsibility. So BYU has a formal class in project management, and I wanted to mention this to you. It's the Project Management Professional class. I actually took the class here. They offer it on Saturdays, and if you're a BYU employee, you get a discount. It's quite a class, and frankly, it's huge amounts of memorization. Why would anyone want to do this to themselves? Because many, many jobs listed as a criteria, PMP certification. So there's two levels. There's one that's the PMP, which is the higher one, and you have to be able to document your project management, and they like it in categories, like, and I can't tell you the exact numbers. And PMI, I think .org is the website, but you have to say, I've spent 100 hours organizing a project, 100 hours controlling a project, 100 hours closing. So it's good to start keeping track of those hours and getting your current supervisor to sort of sign them off so that when you go to apply, you can do so. I know that the LDS Church, if you ever apply for a job for them, but you know, who'd want to leave here? But if you should ever apply for a job there, almost every project management job, this is a requirement that you have the PMP certification. So you can check it out on ce.byu.edu. And as I said, I took the class, and the last class I was really, really sick, and I had a hard time focusing, and I thought, what is my problem? And 2 days later, I was in the hospital. I had massive kidney stones. So I truthfully did not take the exam. So my goal is to take it this fall because I lost several months of happiness there. So one should not be surprised that project management is hurting cats. And you know, you've seen this a million times. But it's kind of like parenting. You know, it's work. And if it wasn't work, they wouldn't have to pay us. So don't be surprised. It is constant worry. My problem is leaving it at the job and going home and not waking up in the middle of the night and going, oh, shoot. But it's constant worry of just organizing. And we just have to accept that. My experience is primarily in software training. I worked in a large adult vocational school in California and taught thousands, literally, of adults on how to use various software programs. I also created an on-the-job training program, so I worked at many industries, training people to work there. So my sympathy is always with the end user. And as an end user, I kind of didn't care what the developer, engineer, programmer had to say. Make it work. And I always wanted to get my hands around their neck and go, what were you thinking? And why is this screen like this? So honestly, I think that's why my boss hired me. I had to focus on the end user and not the developer. And it's sort of a wrestle match to get things so that the users like them. The most important thing to do is to create good partners. And this is a lessons learned that I've learned over the years. Good partners are the engineers, the programmers. You know, they don't like to be called programmers, but programmers, the department heads, the actual end users, the accounting department. Everyone has to help you make a project. And in my experience, I am nobody's boss. So I have to create good relationships with people and hope that we can all work together to get the project done. And those relationships are more important really than just about anything. So I'm going to show you this little video that I now send to every one of my customers. Do you know what? I didn't test the sound. Let's see if the gospel's true. And it just works for nothing. I forgot to check that. Sorry. That's irresponsible of me, but let's see if I can get her to make noise.
User experience is the science and art of designing a product like a website or software application so that it's easy to use, so that it fits the expectation that the user has for it, and so that it meets business goals. There's a whole methodology around designing a user experience, and sometimes people ask me, is it worth it to do all that work to design a user experience?
Now, and this is
So
project
let's talk
management,
about
it's the same
the
thing.
return on investment, or ROI, of doing user experience work. IEEE is a professional organization that puts out reports and does research for programmers, developers, and engineers, and they put out an article called Why Software Fails. Here's some interesting data from their article. They estimate that the amount of money that is spent worldwide in information technology is estimated at $1 trillion a year. The percent of projects that are abandoned because they are hopelessly inadequate is up to 15% of all projects. The percent of revenue that goes to the IT group is 5% of a company's total revenue, and up to 10% if it's a financial or telecommunications company. The amount of time that programmers spend on rework that is actually avoidable is 50% of their time. The cost of fixing an error after development is 100 times that of fixing an error before development of the project is completed. Of the top 12 reasons that projects fail, 3 of the top 12 are directly related to what we would call user experience or user-centered design work, and those 3 are badly defined requirements, poor communication among customers, developers, and users, and stakeholder politics.
As if that
So the
happened
kind of
here.
work that user experience professionals do, stakeholder interviews, user research, user testing, user-centered design, these are all things that can fix at least 3 of those 12 reasons why software fails. You actually can calculate the savings or additional revenue or benefit that you get from improving the user experience of a product. So let's look at some examples to make this more concrete. First example I want to talk about is, let's say that you are a micro-lending company. So these are often nonprofit organizations that look for donations from people, and then they take that money and they lend it out in very small loans to people around the world who need the money to run a small or a home business in order to better their situation. So you have a website and people donate money at your website, but the searching and donating part of the interface at the website is confusing and hard to use. And you have estimated that 50 customers a day are actually abandoning before donating because of the poor user experience. So let's do some calculations. Each customer, let's say, donates an average of $50 over the course of a year. So you are losing $2,500 a day, or $912,500 a year. If you spend $50,000 to fix the user experience issues, and another $50,000, let's say, to rewrite the code based on those user experience improvements, we can estimate you're going to spend $100,000 improving the user experience. It will take you 40 days or a little over a month then to realize the investment, because you've got $912,500 a year that you could improve. So in a little over a month, you've recouped your investment. There are many measurements that would be meaningful. For example, conversion rate. That's the number or the percent increase of visitors to a website who either buy or donate Or it doesn't have to do with money. It might be they take the action you want them to take, like register at the website. Or you might be interested in the decrease in the number or percent of drop-off or abandonment. The decrease in the number of calls to the help desk. Or maybe by making a user experience improvement, you can reduce the amount of training that's required. For instance, if it's an internal software application. Maybe you want to increase the usage of a software application. Maybe you're looking to save user time, or maybe you want to save development time. Perhaps errors are what you are trying to reduce. Whatever measure you choose, calculating the return on investment is a way to show the value of doing user experience work. Here's one of my favorite quotes from Albert Einstein. I think he said it best. Any intelligent fool can make things bigger and more complex. It takes a touch of genius and a lot of courage to move in the opposite direction. If you'd like your own copy of this drawing to download and print, go to humanfactors.com/ROIposter.asp.
So it's just ROI of UX if you want to watch that again. It's a very powerful presentation to show to people who you're trying to talk into your way of thinking, okay, in terms of project management. Because what this is teaching us is that in software, we can save a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of aggravation, hard feelings, if we make the effort. Is that me? Shoot. Well, that's scary. What's on the internet that I didn't know? There you go. Yeah, there we go. So we can save a lot of time and aggravation by doing our work up front. Okay, so everything has to be agreed upon at the beginning. And project management always goes back to these scope, time, cost, scope, time, cost. I guarantee you it'll be on the PMP test. But what we and our partners have to realize in project management is that once we make the deal, we agree this is going to be our project. We're going to do this much work in this much time, and we're going to charge you this much money. Then that's it. The deal's the deal. It's like a house. If you agree to build a house and then suddenly you say, well, could you add a pool on? And could you make it a 4-car garage instead of a 2-car garage? Something's got to give. Are you giving up plumbing or electrical? What's got to give? Or a lot more money. Now in the IT department, our problem is even if people have large amounts of money, we have limited number of employees. Like all of your departments, we can't hire as many people as we want. We have X number of programmers and we just have to deal with it. So explaining this to our customers and our engineers is really important. When I had small children, I liked them to think that they had choices. And I would say to them, which color would you like? I had already chosen the sandal based on price and availability and size, but I let them choose the color. Well, the same is true with our work. Once we figure out what the size and the price is, then we have limited choices, and someone has to make those hard choices. And these are the 5 official tasks of project management. Initiate a project, and that's more of a marketing thing, like why do we need to do this project? Plan and design, which is obviously the biggest, most important part. And then execute and construction. I tend to step back a little bit at this point because the engineers are doing the work. Monitoring and controlling. Who controls programmers? I just cheer and beg. And then completion to make sure that we have completed what we said we were going to do. It's true. So negotiation. Now I'm kind of good at this. Okay, up front, we need to give customers shared responsibility. So if you're in a department and your boss says, build this for me, you need to make them sit down and spend time with you to write out what the goals of the website are, or whatever app you're building. What is it that you're going to do with this? Why do you want it? Write those things down. Because if you don't write them down, then you don't know in the end, did you deliver? Okay? Next is specific feature lists. People have in mind what they want. Why are we being asked to do this project? And we have to build up this respect for the process of managing the project properly. And then when we have partners is we need to make sure that the person who's partnering with us, their staff doesn't come after us. And I know that sounds funny, but it does happen. I will make an arrangement with the department head, and then all their staff starts to call me and they'll say stuff like, well, he or she doesn't know what we really need, so let me just tell you. And that's really tough, because that puts me in an awkward position where, who am I to say to the department head, your staff is talking behind your back. So that's a tough one. Okay, possible goals and deliverables. I ask the people open-ended questions, what is it you want? And they usually will say, we want it to look more modern. And so then I say, could you send me some links to some sites that you think look modern? So if they send them to me, then I have a sense of what they're saying. People will say, well, users are complaining. They want it to look better. And I say, okay, well, who? And I really, really, really like surveying and talking to the actual end users. And I'll talk a lot more about that tomorrow when I do the user experience class. But in project management, the same thing. Who is it that's saying it? What are the percentages? If 2 people are complaining about something, is it worth $50,000 to your department to redo it? That's up to you, okay? Maybe you're super rich, okay? But if you get a ton of complaints, then what's a ton to you? Is that 100? Is it 1,000? Whatever. So let me give you some statistics. I always use them because then I always get my way, okay? In the last 6 months, we have had around 800 people look at the mobile app gallery sites. They were my idea. I thought they were a marvelous idea, where we would have photos of the art museum on one gallery, the Bean Museum on another, the BYU photo department. I thought it was a terrific idea. The art museums had the most hits, just under 900 in the last 6 months. The testing center feature that we added on in the same 6 months, 600,000 hits. Yeah, good thing we didn't spend a lot on the gallery feature, because that was all my idea, and I thought it was so great. And so sometimes we have to, get some data behind what we're doing, and make sure before we spend the money, we realize what is going to be the return that we're expecting. And some people are rich and they can just spend money, but I always like to have some data. Deliverables should be a list of things that you're expecting at the end of the project, whatever they are, 2 things, 5 things, 10 things, so that when the project's over, you can have that glorious moment where you take your pen, because it's not as good digitally, and cross them off. That's a really nice feeling. So something very specific. This is super important, is identify all the stakeholders, okay, everybody. And you say to the person who first contacts you, after they tell you what they want, you say to them, and this is the question I've developed, is there someone else who could possibly override or influence this decision? And then they'll say, oh, well, yeah, I'll have to, when it's done, I'll need to run it by. Done? I want to know who that person is at the beginning. So identify all those people. And at BYU, we have a lot of uplines. Some people report to 2 or 3 people. We have faculty who work in departments and they teach classes. We have departments that serve, department secretaries who serve multiple departments. You got to find all those people and get them all to sign off before the work is done. It would be very much like building a home for a family, and you've only asked one of the spouses or one of the family members if they approve. Okay, so really important. I have been burned on this a couple of times, and I don't want it to happen to you. And there are some people who think they are decision makers. Make sure that the real decision makers break the bad news to them and leave you out of the loop, okay? And that's super important, and I ask people that. Is there somebody else who thinks they're a decision maker? You'd be surprised at people who think. I personally like open-ended questions. I'm not a big fan of radio button Qualtrics kind of surveys for this kind of work. I ask people, what do you think is wrong with your current app? What's bothering you? What's driving you crazy? A telltale sign for me is, are you writing things down while you're using your app? That's a sign that the app's not working properly. So I like to ask the customers open-ended questions, and you usually get the key pain points so that you can build your new app properly. Okay, process. You've seen it. I brought a giant batch of them. Once you've talked to somebody, That's family history. We're not doing that. Once you talk to somebody, you're going to get Post-it notes, and I have the extra large ones. And you write down all the tasks on your Post-it notes, and you stick them up on a whiteboard. And so, you know, we want to log in, we want to check some hours, we want to view a camera. And this is for the testing center feature, where we put all the things that people might want to do. They want to be able to log in. They want to see the camera in the testing center. Did you know there's one there? That is the most commonly viewed camera on campus. How long is the testing center line? I want to see my grades by term, check my test scores. And then you literally sit around and you sequence them and say, well, what's the most common thing people do? Well, they actually want to check their scores. So they choose by term and then the actual test. And then they like to look at the camera, and then they like to look at the hours. So this kind of physical exercise, or whiteboard, it works the same, is extremely valuable for people to say, oh, we left something out. Very, very important. So you can use smaller Post-it notes, but anyway, still very, very helpful. And the important point is that it's super cheap, super cheap. And it brings out questions. When we're checking for scores, do you want them to show every score they've ever had in their history of BYU, or do you want them to be able to choose by date or by term? Okay, we ended up doing it by term. Okay, this is a mock screen. That's something that we're working on this week. The wireless department wants to have an easy way for people to report wireless outages on the mobile app. Can you tell me what the problem with that is? Yeah, you don't have any connection, yeah. So what do you think the feature is that we have to build? Yeah, some way for it to sort of hold it until you get to wireless and then upload, okay? So the first discussion was, this is what I collected from talking to the OIT engineers who want to do this. And so that was the first list of requirements. So I built this mock-up, and I love this program. If you've never seen it, it's called Balsamic, and it's really cheap. It's like $80. And, excuse me, this app is designed to focus on planning and not on font or color or pretty. It just gets things on the screen so that you can have those discussions with the stakeholders to make sure everybody agrees. So we said, okay, we're going to let people tell us the building they're in, the room number they're in or near, and then these descriptors are, I'm outside the room, I'm inside the room, I'm in the hallway or other. And then what's the problem? Slow, intermittent, weak, other, and then we were going to give them comments. So this was the first go. So then I went and talked to the engineers who were going to build this, and they're like, no, Joanne. So here's version 1, and after we had the talk, here's version 2. It's select the building, tell us the room number, because we can't trust that every room number in this entire campus has a number on it, every closet, every door, and we made it an optional field. Mind you, we haven't even built this, okay? And then to assist in fixing the problem, give us as much detail about the location as possible. So we're going to give them a text box where they can say, under the stairs, by the trash can, whatever. It also gives us the opportunity when someone says, well, as soon as I stepped out in the parking lot, the wireless cut out. Then we can go, but at least we have a better idea. And notice it says, click submit when you have wireless. So we're going to build it so the person can put it in, but when they get somewhere, they can click the button. Now, I'd like it to automatically just suction off the app, but so far we haven't figured that out. But this has cost us nothing to do. We haven't even built it. We probably won't start it for a couple of weeks. But by having these discussions, we're going to get a better idea. Now, next, I'm going to take it to some students. Oh, and by the way, I don't do that. I'm going to have students take it to students and ask them what they think, okay, and get their opinion. Because I am not our target market. I'm target market times 2. So, all right. So deliverables, we've talked about those. And how do you keep track of those? There's a lot of debate on this one. I'll just put it out there. Microsoft Project, I know how to use Microsoft Project. Have any of you ever used it? very, very detailed. You put in every single thing. You put in what the task is, how many hours, who's the engineer, what date you're going to start it, and what it's dependent on. So if you must first build the data table before you can start the web page, then those are linked, and they can't, this one cannot precede the other, okay? It's a marvelous program, and it takes a boatload of time, okay? When I came here to work at IT, they said, we don't use it. It's not worth the time. We've tested it. It's not worth our time. Most people do use it. We do not. Sometimes people use Google Docs, spreadsheets, a program called Jira, something to keep track of tasks, just like a chore chart for kids. I encourage you to try the Microsoft project, just to look at it, maybe get a trial and see if that works for you. But it has to be, again, a return on investment. If it's going to take you 20 hours a week to maintain it, is it really worth it? And will people do better work? Here, the decision has been no, not really. So, okay, engineer relations. Okay. Our programmers are incredibly smart. Sherwin and Katria, they're on my team. We work together every day. They are really, really very brilliant. And I am not their boss. So my entire life is a combination of begging, cheerleading, encouraging, checking, inspiring. Yeah, that's what I do. And another thing I do is I try to protect them from customers. Because what happens is people think they've got like the red bat phone, you know. I get to call the engineer, I get to call the engineer. No, because the engineer may not just be working on their task, they work on 3, 4, 5 other things, and we have a really strict priority list. And so part of what I try to do is shield the engineer and facilitate the customer. Because sometimes when customers call the engineer and they tell them something, they're like, oh, sure, I'll do that. And they completely forget. And then later on, someone says, it didn't happen. I said, what? I didn't hear about that. So by putting myself in the middle, at least I add it to the list, and they can yell at me when I've forgotten it. So that's an important thing. Let's see. We like to check things off, and we don't like to do it digitally, which is hilarious for technos, you know. I noticed that the programmers like to write it on their whiteboard and cross it off, or a piece of paper and cross it off. If you have it in digital and all you do is delete it, as if you did nothing. So there's some physical, cognitive thing about crossing it off. We all feel better. Estimation's the hardest thing we do, and I put this one here. My engineers, who I really appreciate and like and respect, they're estimating based on this model. Locked in a room by themselves, no one bothering them. I could do that in 10 hours. But the reality is they're out on the floor in a cubicle, people are going by, they're asked questions, stuff is happening, they're checking their email, they're answering their phone, they're texting, they're talking about Pokemon Go, and you know, so we're not talking 10 hours, we're talking 22 hours from start to finish. And so, frankly, different engineers, I have different percentage of padding. I have one engineer that I double anything he tells me. If he says 5 hours, I make it 10 or 12. I have some that they'll tell me 10, and I'll go, all right, 12. And I'm constantly guessing. So when you're estimating, do not estimate this. I was trying to find someone locked in a room that didn't look like a psycho killer, okay? And so, but that's what I always tell them. You're not locked in a room, you're not isolated. What's the real estimate? And if you've ever been in our building, I imagine it's like your offices. They're busy. People are coming and going and stuff is happening, and yeah. So that's the hardest part. And the scary part is I'm really held accountable to that all the time. And I really, most of the time, want to say, this isn't my fault. They told me 7 hours. But part of my job is that guessing, padding. Yeah, that's what I get paid for. Really important is I don't really build anything. I gather requirements and manage the project. But our designers and engineers do all the good work. And I really try to pass that credit on to them. Because wouldn't that be shameful if, like a realtor, you take credit for the house being built? I really don't build this, and so I really try to acknowledge that. So if you're managing a project, very important. Soon after I got here, I managed a project and I got a Sarah Award, and I was so upset because I knew I had not earned it, and I felt terrible. And I am rarely without words, but I really, and people were like, boy, did you look mad. And I was just so worried that this caused offense to the people who really had done all the work. It was a really awkward, I felt terrible. So they give you a cash prize. I bought pizza for the entire team and spent the whole thing because I just felt so awful. So be very careful about credit because I would have been offended because clearly they had done the work and I just was, cheering. All right, here's my wish list for engineers in case you ever encounter them. Okay, you're smart if you're an engineer, okay? You're really a genius. But never try to intimidate our customers. I was with an engineer and we were in a department and a person asked a question and he said, well, that's really stupid. Never say stupid around customers, okay? He was tall, I slugged him in the arm. I'm sure that's a workplace harassment claim coming, but it was like, really? Yeah, so don't intimidate people. Many engineers have never had a real job. They were smart when they were in high school, so they've always had programming jobs. They've built websites for friends and family, but they haven't been at Taco Bell. And so it's important for empathy to pass over and see what it's like to run an office, answer the phone, deal with cranky people at the counter, whatever it is. And so I really try to encourage our engineers to be more empathetic. Bid realistically, it's the same thing in reverse, and I really try to get them to do that one. Okay, this one's a tough one. Don't override the design because you don't like it. We spent a lot of time designing, and sometimes they just build it the way they want, and I have to go, no, you're not that smart. And so there's a little arm wrestle that has to go on, and I'm like that. So honestly, I'll say, I bet you can't make it exactly like that. And they're like, we're not fooled. I said, yeah, I know, just make sure it's like that. But that happens a lot. So, and they often have good ideas. And I'll take good ideas, but they can't just do that. So if you're an engineer who does that, slap yourself and never do that again, okay? All right, tell me your schedule. Sometimes they'll go on vacation. They don't even tell me. And I'm thinking, why is this ground to a halt? And somebody say, oh yeah, he's in Hawaii. Please tell me. Respond when I send you an urgent message. Okay, our programmers practically have their phone melted to their hand. So when I text them to say a system is down and they don't do anything, I know they're blowing me off. And so then, this is what I do, is I text them again and include their direct supervisor. I always get a response, okay? So please respond. And then bill your hours accurately. I have an obligation to our customer. I take their money that they could use in their department for whatever they want, and I feel a serious responsibility to use it as economically as possible. And so my begging to the engineers is don't just say, 8 hours on that project. You didn't spend 8 hours on it. You might have spent 5.5, and the other 2.5 you did your email and made some calls and talked to people about legitimate things, and So I take that very personally, and so that's my wish list for engineers. Okay, tasks and accountability. Sounds like something we've heard of before. We have very specific task lists, and we try to do deadlines. We're not as good at that as we ought to be. And sequencing. This uncomfortable looking meeting is something we do and are required to do. Once a week, we have a stand-up Scrum meeting where I say to each engineer, what are you working on? And what is a problem? What's a blockage for you? What's a barrier? And they have to tell me. And it's a little bit of public humiliation and collaboration together, where we identify the tasks, we identify the roadblocks, we help each other in a collaborative way, we encourage each other, but there's a little bit of accountability there. Like, what have you been doing for the last week? Some people do them every day. If I did them every day, they wouldn't come, even if I did text them. But I also stop by their desks, but we have an official, everybody together, we all voice what we're working on and what the roadblocks are. And they tell me, Joanne, we can't continue because you didn't find out what color they want. We can't continue because you didn't do your part. So it's group shame, okay? So it's intentional that it's stand up, because if people are comfortable, they're checking their email, they're gaming, they're playing. Yes, sir? Mm-hmm.
Really likes to challenge.
Oh, well, they don't work with us. Well, you just say, we have 10 minutes, and you pick that person last. you know, and just go through. We had this with just project managers, and they had the timer going. And, you know, I'm a pretty fast talker, but I only got through 2/3 of my projects, and the bell rang off, and he said, we don't need to hear the rest till next week. So you can believe me, I'm putting my priority items first tomorrow morning. So, yeah, so I would put them last.
That works if you're running as well.
Yeah, oh. Well, then I would go, like, tell the Scrum Master what you want. Yeah, that's what I would. The person who's in charge. Okay, communication is the most important thing. I still like email. We use Slack, which is an app at OIT, which is fine. But I like email because then I get a real nice document that I can save for further reference. Because I'm controlling a lot of policy issues, security, privacy, those kinds of things. I always like to give the bad news earlier. It's less painful than at the last second. That's super important. And don't throw the engineers under the bus, even if it really was their fault. I'll say, we have not made our deadline. We did not do this, because I'm part of that team. Even though I could say, it was totally him. That is not appropriate. So we are responsible. One of the things that I like to explain is what are our constraints here as part of our communication, how our department operates, and I'd like to know how yours operates. If you're only part-time, then I certainly can't expect you to be available to me every afternoon at 3 o'clock because you leave at 1. The same is in reverse. People need to know that I typically have 8 or 9 projects floating around and try to keep them all in the air and doing a good job. Those kinds of communications I think are important for people to work together and to work well together. So high tech, as I mentioned before, is Microsoft Project, very detailed. It's very accurate. It takes lots of time. I've offered to do it several times, and the engineers say no. I had like a New Year's conference with my head engineers, and I said, how can we do a better job? And I'll put the time into Microsoft Project, even if I have to work overtime and stuff. And they're like, well, we wouldn't look at it anyways. So I actually have a programmer that every week I put a Post-it note on the corner of his monitor. In little handwriting, I number 4 or 5 tasks. And he does them without speaking to me, and we are happy. And then I swap it out and put his new task there. Okay? So that's fine. He doesn't like me talking to him. Can you imagine? And he doesn't seem to like other things. So Post-it notes work, and I'm grateful for his very, very good work. So you've got to work at people's style. But if you want to make project management a career, you better learn Microsoft Project. Okay?
There's some tools in between too, like Trello,
Sure.
Modern, Cardbase.
Lots and things, yeah. So, yeah, anybody else have a suggestion on that? Yep. Yeah, lots and lots of them. But my suggestion would be, if this is going to be a career, I'd go look at job openings and see what they're asking for. Not that we would ever leave here. But I don't see those other ones mentioned. Yes, sir?
That's a hilarious analogy to how much project management and how deep you need to go in order to do that, based off of how many pizzas you need to order for your kickoff. And today's referred to it as like a 2-pizza meeting. Doesn't need anything more than just some pen and paper, and then it's big catered event.
Yeah, I agree. Can you imagine the project management on that new MTC building? Just to get all those parts, and yeah, be a nightmare. Okay, so here's my lessons learned. Just to write everything down. I do my best to protect the engineers and make their lives as easy as possible. Some of them, I think, appreciate that, and some are like, what does she do here? But I do my best to keep things in good order, and that we're on track and we're delivering what we need to deliver. Leave work at work is super important, because I really do try to spend a lot of time in the departments where I serve, and try to figure out what's their job like, how do they feel, what is this experience like, and it gets to be a little stressful. One of my systems I'm in charge of is the honor code system. I literally pray for that data every day, that it's secure. If someone wants to hack the library and find out what books people have checked out, fine. But that data, oh my gosh, I really pray for that data because I don't want it to become public. And there's a limit, you know, of how intense you should be about your job. And I try not to take things personally, but I really do. I should go to counseling. When things don't go well, I internalize everything, and then my husband says, quit that job. That's about all I have to say. So anybody else have some suggestions in your experience on project management? Good things, bad things, something you'd like from a project manager or from OIT, you could tell me. We'll turn the camera off and you could tell me. Yes, sir.
I guess what we've kind of noticed where I work on campus as a project manager, just keeping the developers busy more than anything is one of the challenges that we always do is just trying to find something. I mean, especially because, I mean, as student developers, they try and do everything so quickly. So, and then sometimes they get into trouble because they're just sitting there like, not really
Well,
doing much.
a suggestion would be, what department are you in?
We're with the McKay School, but
Well, have them do some of your user testing. Just say, go out and talk to people and see what they think of this. And one, it develops empathy for the end user, but you might get some really good hard data. The testing center feature came directly from an open-ended survey. I've never had a test in the testing center, so I didn't know they took down the TVs last fall. Yeah, so that's what I would do to keep them busy, and they really like that.
yeah.
Yeah, I've seen quite a few students, they really enjoy having that face-to-face contact with the real users. Yes, sir.
I was just hoping to hear some more real-world examples of projects you've worked on in OIT and some of this stuff.
Sure, I do the mobile app, and that takes quite a lot of our time. We're doing a massive rewrite of the Android version. It was built and maintained, whereas the iOS has really been recrafted several times. So now we have, it's just a resource issue. We're not discriminating against Android users, but now we're really working hard to bring that one up to snuff because it is a little shabby. So I spent a lot of time on that. I did the original online endorsement system, and that was a massive thing. I'm not in charge of that anymore. If you get a citation on campus, that goes through a system that we do, the parking and traffic system. What else do I do? Any small projects that come along. I work on a large project, the homepage and calendar. We do a lot of that. Here's an example. Sometimes you don't always build, you buy. So that's worth a minute. The key and lock office contacted us, and I've been in there several times. Anyone care to guess how many keys are on this campus? Okay, the correct answer is in excess of 100,000 keys.
And if you lose one, you have to do a police report.
Yeah, more than 100,000 keys. And that includes BYU, campus housing, and the MTC. So more than 100,000 keys. And it's possible with this lock that any number of keys could open it, and they don't match. So if I need a key that opens this door here and one in OIT and one in the Richards building, then my key is unique. It opens those 3 doors. And so they're very sophisticated in how they manage those. And then some, of course, are electronic keys. Some are 3-dimensional. They're not, you know, they have a cut that goes like this, but then they have cuts that go like that. Okay, now it's sad how much I know about keys because they needed a new app and they wanted us to build it. So I went over there and I spent all this time, and the more I looked at it, I thought, oh my gosh, it will take us years to build this app. So suddenly purchasing an app that cost $30,000 was a deal, because I would have to contact lock makers and key suppliers and get their daily updates and all that kind of stuff. So for them, I said, just buy it. It'll be cheaper, it'll be better, we can't duplicate that. So I often do the build or buy discussion. The study abroad program is wanted us to build an app and add it to the mobile app so that when you travel, you could take pictures of your receipts and then upload those into YExpense and into PeopleSoft, which would be very nice. And I was like, oh, no, because I'd have to take pictures and have OCR scanning, pull that in, add accounting, chart of accounts. You know, as this is going, I'm thinking, oh, because I'm thinking Post-it notes as someone's describing this to me. I'm thinking of all the processes, and I'm like, oh no. Anyways, I found one that does that, and they say they can hook into our PeopleSoft. So we're waiting for that meeting, the Prove It meeting. So I will go to that meeting, and I will take an engineer. And when the sales guy says, oh, sure, it'll work, I point to the engineer who will say, really? Let me see that right now. And so we'll prove that, and frankly, we don't charge for this, and we'll prove that it really and truly does work. And we'll assist with the uploading, and we want people to be able to log in with your net ID and all that kind of stuff. And so we'll facilitate that, but we aren't going to build it. The use price of it will probably come out to be less than $5,000 a year. That's a deal. And so we're like, yay. So we kind of crossed it off our list like we helped, but we didn't build. Does that make sense? Yeah, so I do a lot of that. Did you have something else to say?
No, it was resolved. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So that's really all I have to say, and I appreciate you guys coming. Any comments, questions? You want to throw anything? All right. I'll just share one thing with you in case you don't know this. Are you at all familiar with our BYU, our setup, our OIT, our funding, how we work? Most of our projects are planned more than, about a year in advance. The list for 2017 is already done of what we will do in 2017. And those projects are decided by the 7 vice presidents. They decide there's a finite number of dollars for technology at the OIT department, and they cut up that pie how they choose to, and we get a chore chart. And then when other departments, who we love and respect, come to us and they say, can you help us? We're like, yes, I'm just not sure when. And so we try to slot those in with that other giant list that we get. And most of our funding comes from those, like when we charge you, that covers our salary. That's how we work, in case you wanted to know that. And so a lot of times people are like, well, gosh, OIT won't do anything for me. And it's true, because we have this giant chore list that we must complete every year, and the extra projects we have to fit in. But so as much as we can help you, like the Drupal users group, we want to. That was Sherwin and Katria's idea, that if they help people do better in their departments, then we have less disasters that we have to try to help clean up when we have time. And so as much as we can facilitate, help, mentor a little bit, we're wanting to do that, because our constraints are pretty strict about what we can and cannot do with our time. And like you, we can't hire a bunch more people. With no trouble at all, I could double or triple our workload. I just would have to go into an office and go, are you kidding me? You're still keeping that in a spiral notebook? And I do see that. And I could say, I could build you an app for that, but who could I get to build it? Because I can't hire anybody else. And so that's kind of our constraint. So we need to work on our PR so that people understand that. So we're not, if we turn you down, it's not because we don't like you or we're picking on you. It's just our hands are kind of tied with our chore chart. And we do our best. But we are limited. So that's why we want this Drupal group and hopefully a WordPress group to flourish and people collaboratively help each other. And then that way we're not leaving you bereft. Okay, I think I'm done. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much for coming.